Hi, this is Kate from ADHDkidscanthrive.com. Thank you for listening. My special guest today is Dr. Laura Honos-Webb. She is a clinical psychologist and author specializing in ADD and ADHD. She teaches online courses, written 7 books, and is co-founder of Bonding Health, a company created to help improve ADHD parent-child bonding through research-based exercises. Thank you, Laura, for being here. Let's get started. Hi, Laura. Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today, talking about ADHD, executive functioning, and emotional dysregulation. So let's get started by talking about what you're doing with Bonding Health and how that will support parents who are raising ADHD kids.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on, Kate. And Bonding Health is an app that should be out in about 3 months, and it's for parents of children with ADHD. Of course, it's relevant to teens as well. We tend to think it would be useful for any parent because this really boils down to executive functioning more broadly in addition to ADHD. But the main goals of the app is that we go symptom by symptom. So you can choose a symptom, and then you'll get a series of guided questions. And some of those questions will actually include suggestions for how do you handle a certain behavior. So if your child is not getting started, you could say, what would be the benefits of getting started? What are the costs of not getting started? How will you feel when you get this done? So there's some of the questions will have suggestions. So it's helpful for parents, but some of them are reflective to help them find maybe a more positive interpretation, not only of a specific behavior, or just a more positive reframe. And so that could look like, sometimes when kids talk too much, it feels like they're not following directions. It feels like it's rude. But a lot of kids that talk too much, are the kids that are really interested and engaged and have a lot of ideas they want to share. And it's, as a parent of a teenager, you are and I am as well, we just want our kids to talk to us.
Right.
So, back when they were little kids and they were just talking all the time and we're like, oh, you're talking too much. There's a time and a place, of course. And so it helps us to find that there's many gifts that go along with talking too much. And that can be, you make friends easily, you have a high verbal ability, and so there's finding some of those positives instead of, my whole approach is about, we don't want to define our children as deficit disorders. It's one thing to say they have a neurodevelopmental disorder, but we don't want to say that that's who they are as a person. And most of the ADHD symptoms show up in specific environments, particularly school. And so we want to be able to recognize the whole child. And so that's really the emphasis of Bonding Health. And really, we also want to foster the parent-child bond. When you think about, it's almost obvious that is the foundation of mental health. And whatever mental health challenges a child does have, that bond is going to allow them to have self-confidence in the face of neurodiversity.
Right. So it's very important. Okay. And so Bonding Health is going to help. I think when you're raising your neurodiverse child, though, inside the culture of what academics is in this day and age, that's where like the rubber hits the road, so to speak. So Bonding Health will give parents like the language to use when your child doesn't they're procrastinating or not seeming motivated to complete boring tasks.
Exactly. And so part of that can be, in some of the tools might be, what will your future self think of this? And asking your child these questions. We have, like, some of the suggestions might be, ask your child this. And, what goals do you have? And asking goals is probably one of the single most important things that parents can do, because what you're doing is you're reducing that control battle. Like, my mom wants me to do this, or my dad wants me to do this, and I don't want to. But what you're turning it into is what they want for themselves. And so that motivation comes between what they want for themselves and where they want to go. Right. So it reduces that control battle. And also it helps you to regulate your mood, because if a child's performing poorly and they set a goal. I'm going to improve my grades next semester. I'm going to do my homework every night. I'm going to open up my backpack right when I get home. So, I mean, those, any of those could be a goal. All of them could be a goal. It becomes between themselves and the goal that they set for themselves, between who they are now and their future self. And so it can reduce conflict, but it also manages the mood, because you're like, the whole purpose of a goal is that I can have a different future. I can get better at what I'm doing. I can build these skills. Skill building is really the essence of bonding health.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited to see it. I can't wait. Okay, so Laura, tell us how you talk a lot about building executive functioning skills. So how are executive skills and functioning skills and ADHD related?
Okay, so ADHD is, the main symptoms are a lack of attention. And then, of course, impulsivity, and then hyperactivity. Now, executive functioning is number one, is actually the ability to pay attention. Because you can imagine, if you're not paying attention, it's going to be hard to do, everything else, whether that's, following through, breaking things down. And so that attention is going to be critical. And that's a part of executive functioning, and of course, ADHD. But emotional regulation is not technically a part of ADHD. Now, Dr. Russell Barkley has written about how emotional dysregulation is a key causal factor of most ADHD symptoms. So it is directly related to ADHD, but not in terms of the actual diagnosis. That makes sense.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Wait, is that because like the DSM-5 hasn't put the emotional dysregulation into the
That's right. Yeah.
as a reason? Okay.
Yeah. So it's not a diagnostic symptom of ADHD, but it is what his point, and many clinicians' point, is that emotional dysregulation makes it hard to pay attention. It makes it hard to get started. It makes it hard to follow through in a sequence of events, because you're emotionally disrupted. It disrupts your attention. It disrupts your planning and organization. I mean, even as adults, we can figure out, if something happens that's really upsetting, we may not be able to finish our to-do list for the day. We may feel like we can't plan, or we may feel like we can't even pay attention, frankly.
Okay. And then an ADHD person, I always feel like it's more like their central nervous system just operates a little bit differently than a typical person. So I think it's that I've had it described to me like a hum, like a dull hum that you might feel, right? Which makes you feel restless, which makes it hard then to focus and then do all these different tasks. Okay. So how can a parent help a child kind of start to build these executive functioning skills that they do need to develop? Is it possible for a parent to help their ADHD child build skills?
Yes, of course. And, I think one of the simplest ways to get into this is through helping your child build self-talk. And so as parents, it's so tempting to say, how many times do I have to tell you, I tell you to do this, I tell you to do that. Now, the shift is, tell yourself that when you get home, you need to unpack your backpack right away. Tell yourself that you can use your smartphone after you finish your 25 minutes of homework that we've agreed on as a good starting point. Sure. And you can even suggest self-talk for them, that, the harder I try, the better I do. Now, that's, of course, the growth mindset, but it's one thing, to encourage that. It's another thing to give them the self-talk so that they are constantly telling themselves, if I try harder, I'll do better,
right?
Rather than I'm not good enough.
And so how the parent talks to the kid has a huge impact.
Absolutely.
Right. And I would imagine this would be for any child who's struggling with anxiety or depression as well, right? It's just the language that's used by the teacher and the parent.
Exactly.
Especially to keep going and building those skills. Okay, so I brought up the teacher piece, which is the academic piece, which can be the most challenging. So how do you recommend a parent team up with the teacher to help build these skills that the child needs to be building, whether it's like they have missing assignments, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
How would a parent like work with the teacher to help build the skill of turning in your homework on time or within a certain window of time?
Yeah. So of course, first the first step is going to be communication with the teacher. And I think that it can be that hopefully getting some kind of reasonable accommodations, like if they hand it in, at this by this time, that this will, that there's a kind of like rewards for them to do that. And I think, also getting feedback from the teacher. What are they seeing in the classroom? Are they attentive? Sometimes kids are not handing in homework, but they're actually sort of paying attention in the class, and trying to get kind of as much of the positives and the negatives as possible, because you can use those positive at home to say, well, your teacher said, you are actually attentive in class, but you're just forgetting to hand in your homework. And so let's come up with a strategy for you to remind you to do your homework, remind you of the dates. And so that can become where the planning and organization element comes in.
Right.
And so, because kids are taking a lot of classes and there's a lot of due dates. So, also that can be helping them to set those goals, because then it doesn't become, how many times do I have to tell you, you got to hand in your homework? And it can turn into, well, what kind of goals do you have for yourself in this class? Well, my goal is to get a B, or, for some people it's out, an A, or, to pass for some people, depending on the class. Some classes are really hard. And so figuring out what their goal is and saying, if you want to get to your goal, this is what needs to happen. And then as a parent, again, depending on what age your child is, the younger, the more this, you'll be doing this. And as they get older, hopefully less, but, sometimes you're just trying to get them through.
Right.
You're just doing whatever you have to do. But so at that point, it can be, getting out, almost like a control room where you're like, this is due here, this is due then. Don't forget to go to your teacher's office hours. Don't forget to. And parents, you can always reach out and email teachers and let them know what's going on, let them know that they care a lot and this is what's happening. And I think that they can respond to that level of involvement from a parent, and sympathy and compassion for particularly the neurodiversity aspect.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think you're touching on something too with parents. They're never sure. So if their child, like how involved they should be with the child, right? So
Mhm.
if the child says, I'm going to do well in the 7th grade, let's say, and this is my goal and I want to do well in these classes, but they need a little bit more support,
Mhm.
you know, at home to help them reach their goals. And I think parents struggle with like, how involved should they be? And is it
Mhm.
okay to be involved with their child to help them reach their goals when they have ADHD?
I think with ADHD, yes, and without ADHD, yes, and meaning that it's really responsive in terms of what the kids' goals are for themselves, what the parents' goals are for themselves and for their children, and so yeah, I think it's absolutely appropriate for parents to be involved. And certainly, as they get older, they push you away, and so it can be sometimes you have to find a way to be involved.
Right.
Um, and so it's different at different developmental levels. I think, for many parents, they honestly don't have the bandwidth to do very much for their children. And they shouldn't feel guilty about that, because, the schools also have resources, and, they can, find supports. And to be honest with you, sometimes if it's really school specific, finding a tutor might be better than finding a therapist sometimes. And so it can be really about finding the right resources and optimizing the resources that schools offer. So, sometimes we as parents don't even realize that there are many, staff people assigned to help them out. It could be, different roles in the school, depending on whether it's elementary, middle, or high school. There's, of
Right.
course, different levels. But so I always want to say to parents, don't feel guilty. Whichever side of this you're on, just don't feel guilty. We have enough things to feel guilty about. So yeah, I think you can just check off. I'm not going to sit here and give you 5 reasons you should feel guilty.
Oh, yeah. Thank you,
You know what I
Laura.
mean? So, but really,
But it is a dance, I think. And I
yeah.
think some parents feel like they shouldn't do anything, kind
Mhm.
of the sink or swim. It seems to be like extreme thinking sometimes. If they can't do it, then so be it, right? Or they'll figure it out through a lot of failure. So it's that balance of like, do you let your child fail as they're growing up and building these skills? Or do you find a balance as a parent by accessing resources in the school, doing the IEP to give them the services that they need? It's like
Mhm.
this balancing act of how much support do they actually need to help them get through school in a
Mhm.
successful way, passing,
Mhm.
graduating, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And so again, with ADHD and neurodiversity, it is something that should be accommodated, and that can be very helpful to address that different type of a brain. So
Yeah.
that's really reasonable. And I think, having those conversations with your children, how much, how ambitious are they? What do they want for themselves? And you also wanting to build their confidence. And I think as parents, you certainly, want to provide resources and supports, but also, I think, giving them with a lot of it being giving them the independence to, I have this image of, when a butterfly is a caterpillar and it's kind of pushing itself out of the chrysalis, that's how it builds its wings. And so, meaning that as pushing out of the chrysalis, they that's how they fill out their wings. And there's a story, it might be more of like a old tale or something, but if you cut the chrysalis, then the butterfly won't develop its wings and it won't fly. So there is a lot to say about having them to push themselves out of the struggles that they get themselves into.
Right.
So, and there's is really going to be responsive to the family, to the school situation, the developmental level. You certainly don't want them to miss some like critical milestones, and get the support that you can, as a family offer in terms of time and energy and money.
Okay. So, Laura, you're also an expert when it comes to helping parents understand that dance of ADHD kids using the screen time.
Mhm.
Why is it hard for ADHD kids to manage screen time?
Well, let's just say, first of all, if you kind of follow some of the headlines, that social media particularly is designed to be addictive. And the other part of it is that social media, if that's, where they're spending some of their screen time, also can be very emotionally dysregulating. And so, for girls, they can see, body image issues. There can be bullying online. They can be, even just multitasking. So there's research that shows that just having your phone in the room with you, even if you're not using it, diminishes our attention. That somehow, like if it was in a different room, that just the fact that it's there, somehow your part of your brain is monitoring it. And even if you're not opening it up and doing anything with it. So now imagine, kids and teens, that they're constantly pulled back and forth between what they're doing and what's happening in social media, again, depending on the child's age or teen's age. And so it really, really diminishes attention. And then when we talk about ADHD and we're talking about impulsiveness, the impulse to pick up your phone is going to be harder to resist. And so this being such a powerful distraction, that the impulsiveness is going to make it more sticky.
Okay. And it's interesting too that you said that social media contributes to your emotional dysregulation as well. So if you're
Yeah.
already dysregulated, being on the phone isn't necessarily going to contribute to your health, right? In a positive way.
We don't know. I mean, I think we do know that there can be things like bullying. We do know that, body image issues particularly for girls, is very disruptive. And, fake
Yeah.
filters are all over the place, and they look at themselves in the mirror and they look at what other people are doing.
Right.
And then, also what happens on social media is you'll see your friends and they're out doing something and you're not there.
Right.
Like, why am I not there? or you'll see people who are doing things that are cooler than you're doing. And so it increases that feeling of being left out.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to, say it's all bad. There are many positive things that happen through social media, including people find supports for mental health, people find positive spaces, people find self-help spaces. So it's really, for a parent to be aware that there are positive impacts and there's negative impacts, and being able to set some boundaries, communicate openly about what things they might find on social media that could be very upsetting. And just, on a very basic level, of course, smartphones, emit blue light, which disrupts our sleep. And sleep is the foundation of mental health. So really just from, when we're talking about smartphones, we really need to just talk about when are they using it? If they're using it before bedtime, if they're using it throughout the night, you're disrupting sleep, which is, fundamental to mental health.
I know. And in my personal experience of raising two kids too, like YouTube, like it never ends, right? It never has an ending.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's really hard with time management if you struggle with time management, because the videos just keep going and going and going. And so it's
Right.
really hard to like transition off of that and do something else that might not be as stimulating.
Right. And so when you think about ADHD, so much of it is about distractions. But when you talk about YouTube, watch this next,
Right.
or watch this. If you like that, here's 10 other videos that are just like what you watched. And so they're just like here giving you a platter full of distractions on almost all social media.
Yeah. Okay. And here's another one that parents always feel like their kids can focus really well on the phone, the iPad, whatever it is, right? Gaming, that the focus is just so good when it comes to screen time. But then, of course, when the child's like in an academic setting or something that they're not that interested in, they have a hard time focusing. And so parents will feel like, well, they're able to demonstrate focus and attention with screens. Why doesn't that translate to the real world?
Well, I think that does have to do with stimulation seeking. When we think about impulsiveness, it really is about stimulation seeking. And so, for example, there's one theory, genetic theory of ADHD. And I also want to qualify that by saying there's like no, hard research that one gene, causes ADHD, but they find associations between different genes. And one is called the nomadic gene. And so the nomadic gene means, you evolve to, you see the horizon and you want to run for it. So that's basically stimulation seeking, that you don't want to stay in the safe place. You want to go to the adventure and see the unknown. And of course, that is a great thing. It maps onto discovery, innovation, creativity. But if you have that stimulation seeking nomadic gene, then sitting in a classroom and memorizing, because, sometimes kids can be really interested, like, oh, that's really cool. I learned this cool stuff, but they don't want to sit down and memorize it. And so
Yes.
it is the memorization that can be the hard part, because at that point, there's nothing new about it, but you have to memorize it because you have to get it right on the test. And so that's really where the gap is, that they may be, and then there may be subjects that they just personally are not interested in at all. So it is that element of memorization and getting the right answer. And that can be, that's sort of really falls right into the impulsivity and difficulty paying attention, which are the symptoms of ADHD.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what can make school hard, right? Or boring. It's not very stimulating. Okay. Very insightful.
Yeah. So I think, the first thing that I would think about would be starting with what are their strengths and what are their interests. And then from that part, beginning to say, well, what kind of goals do you want for yourself this summer? And so, and it could be sports they want to play. It could be places they want to go. It could be, and really, so you're combining, what are the things that they feel confident about in their life? What do they think of as their strengths? And what kind of goals do they have? They may want to take a, tennis camp, or they may want to help. Maybe they want to, start some sort of neighborhood job, and, whether it be not a lemonade stand or find something creative to do or make money in creative ways for the older children or teens. And so having them brainstorm a bunch of ideas of things that they want that are going to be related to developing some of their skills and talents, that are going to be related to their own goals. And that can be a structure for some activities. I think the other element that I would think a lot about is, even in terms of, we've been talking a lot about screen time. It could be finding, do they want to be a creator? Do they want to create videos? I'm not saying they should be an influencer, but it could be, just, is there any kind of, any things that they want to create rather than just being always, a passive consumer. And that could be a business. It could be a business idea. It could be, some kids, I think these are usually teenagers, GoFundMes or getting your parents to help you with a business idea. And then even when we're talking about screen time, there are healthy screen time things that are out there. For younger kids, of course, there's always, well, I mean, anyone can do Khan Academy, and there may be fun things on Khan Academy too, or interesting things. I think there's also, for younger kids, PBS Kids, or I know that I had How Stuff Works I think it was a magazine, but it's also
I think it's a
website.
podcast too.
Yeah. So I know that one of my kids love that. Space Race is another website where there's a lot of interest in going to space. So finding some of the online stuff, which is fun and educational. And so you're kind of, what do you call it? Optimizing some screen time.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my question. Do you think for ADHD kids, you have to limit the screen time?
Absolutely. Oh, you have to limit the screen time for all kids and yes, ADHD kids. So that's why I'm also suggesting, do they have a business idea? Do they have activities they want to do? What are their gifts that they want to develop? What are interests that they want to have? Do they want to help out in the neighborhood? So yeah. And of course, as you're noticing, that's hard even during the school year. It's really hard during the summer. But, another thing that parents can do is, what are the benefits of your time on, social media screen time? What are the costs of it? One strategy that I call crowding out, which, and this can be a full-time job for parents. So again, like, give yourself.
I know, no guilt, no guilt.
No guilt here. No, but crowding out could be, maybe even it's just keeping a list of like a dozen suggestions. Oh, go to the basketball court, go to the pool, go to the, maybe parents arrange play dates for younger kids. Here's, we'll go to the library. A lot of libraries will have, even if your kids are not going to be the ones loving to pull books off, they'll have reading hours, they'll have snack time, there'll be other kids there. Usually libraries are pretty good during the summer of just having free activities for any parent.
Yes.
So
keep them keep them busy enough that the phone isn't what's kind of dominating their time during the summer.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Crowding out is probably a good way to say.
Okay, that's good. Mate, with the list of 12 things, like, here's all the other things you need to do before you get the screen time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good advice. Crowding out. We're going to crowd out.
Crowd out screen time. And that helps eliminate the control battle. Like, don't get on your phone. You can't tell me what to do, So by crowding it out, it really reduces the conflict between parent and child, which is, coming back to the app bonding health is really about creating that strong child-parent bond and positive expectations and, emotional regulation for both parent and child.
And just building it. I love what you've said. It's just like little things that you can incorporate like into your daily life to kind of make it more of a positive conversation, empowering versus get your homework done or why haven't you done this and blah, blah, blah. You can go on and on and on. So this kind of helps break the cycle, which is very positive. Okay, Laura, as we wrap it up, do you have any other words of wisdom or anything we can look forward to from you in the future?
Well, I mean, one thing as you were just saying that is, I think sometimes one of the most helpful things that you can say is, what are the benefits of you getting your homework done? And what are the costs of you not getting it done? And even some of the suggestions that how good are you going to feel when it's over with? And, what does your future self want you to do? Instead of, I'm your mom and I want you to do this. What does your future self want you to do? How will you feel a week from now? So these are just some more little brain hacks for giving them questions rather than telling them what to do.
And then as they mature, right, then they have the self-talk in their head.
Exactly.
Right. As they become young adults and fly like a butterfly into the world.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all good. It's very positive. All right. Thank you, Laura, for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. I loved it. It was fun.